Welcome to Lie the Land, where I find musicians, writers and artists, and we take a wander through the Shetland landscapes that have inspired their work. The island of Mousa is our destination tonight. Uninhabited, by humans at least, it lies just off the east coast of the mainland. Famous for a huge Iron Age broch and the storm petrel population, it's been the inspiration for many a soul, including Chris Stout, fiddle player, composer and genre-defying musician. The view for Sandwick over to Mousa has been something he's loved to come back to throughout his well-travelled life. Why did you want to come to Mousa, Chris?
Well, since I was 11 years old, we moved out of Fair Isle and then we moved to Scatness and then we moved to Sandwick. Mum and Dad eventually settled in Sandwick. And where house is on the mainland but overlooks Mousa. So it's pretty much been my view out of the living room window for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. And it's a special place. We've always had a boat. I've enjoyed fishing around Mousa all my life, and it's just an incredible place. I think when you come from Fair Isle and your earliest memories are of small island life, then it's kind of fine to have another even smaller beautiful island in your sight. And so it's a special place and it's really fine to come back with you.
It's comforting to be on a pretty island, I find, and to be surrounded by the sea.
Exactly. I think that's always shaped how I make music as well. Well, just the whole Shetland thing as well. Just that isolation has always been a huge part of my, I suppose, playing, but more in my writing of music. The influence of island life and the sea is kind of ever present. The rugged beauty that is Shetland is definitely sort of omnipresent in my writing. I guess I've been very, very grateful to be brought up here and have that influence, because when you're far, far away and you're trying to convey meaning to folk, then when it's so vivid in your own mind and you know exactly where you come from and the people that you've been brought up by, then it makes your job of conveying music to people around the world so much easier.
I was watching Inga Thompson play last night before, and she was talking about the sea also being present in her music a lot, and all the interesting ways in which that comes out. Not just the sea, but the birds as well, I suppose, and just all this incredible nature we grew up surrounded by.
Exactly. That's it. Exactly. It's not just water. It's rocks. It's sea life and the birds. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's all over the world. Bird life has been kind of often the first sort of influence of music on people listening to bird songs. So it's natural that should continue and be part of our lives. Well, especially coming from Fair Isle.
That's an interesting point. What are you thinking of specifically when you say that about birdsong being the influence?
A lot of music would be influenced by birdsong, but I know that in the west coast of Scotland, some of the pipe music would have been influenced by birdsong. A lot of traditional music and cultures all over the place would have had that as their primary influence. Even in primitive instruments, then the first thing they might have mimicked really could have been the sound of birds. I mean, throughout history, through classical music as well, just the lark ascending, the big Vaughan Williams violin piece, and you've got that. I mean, you've got so many references to birds in music. But then in Fair Isle, being the kind of birdie place it is, and such an important place in the world, it's just constant. Certainly when I was young, and I know you'll remember the same, but just going to the edge of the banks and just hearing this cacophony of roaring and squawking of birds. It was an amazing sound, echoing between the rocks and the cliffs. It's hard to forget that.
It's impossible.
Well, you don't want to forget it.
There's two sounds for me that are completely evocative Fair Isle. One of them is the banks, and especially kittiwakes, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Who've been doing so poorly in the last wee while. But yeah, that cacophony, that big echoing noise, and the smell of it as well. And then at the kind of other extreme is the just like one curlew singing on a summer's evening, on a really still summer's evening across the Isle, and that just gives me shivers, you know.
Yeah, it's really amazing. When I was studying music, for a while I studied electronic music, or more importantly, I studied how to use computer programs to make music. So there was no instruments involved, and often I would use field recordings as inspiration. And I had a lot of bird song from, actually a lot of which was recorded in Fiddler this time, another beautiful island, and that sound was one of them, that curlew, just peeping away. Yeah. You can hear the atmosphere, well, especially in Fiddler as well. There's an echo in the hill there, and when you have the kind of dal reek, that kind of low mist, then there's a different acoustic in the land, and that can amplify, and you can hear that for miles. That's a really, really evocative sound.
It feels, this is a bit cheesy, but it always feels very timeless when you're looking at that and hearing that. Well,
yeah, it is completely timeless, I think. And I love that, like being here on Mousa, it's kind of interesting, a feeling of timelessness, because there's nobody bides here anymore. But even more so, just across at the Nessaburgie there, we were just there at the boat, with the boat that took us over here, but right opposite Mousa Broch, there's another broch at the Nessaburgie, and if you're out there, you can't see any signs of life beyond 1880 or something, where that old settlement was last, had people there. And that's really incredible, because there's no many places you can just actually get away and feel like that. Up at Vagaland in the north there, that's another amazing place like that.
Especially when you're so close to, like, we're looking here for the banks and you're looking there, but then you look into Sandwick, the metropolis.
Well, it is, I can tell you, it's more of a metropolis now than it was when I was brought up, because it's massive. But the houses are that close, but when you're behind the hill and you're just among this old Quarff houses, this ruined houses, then it's really quite an atmosphere to think that the folk bide. They bed in young houses, and then there's the old broch as well, and it's just incredible feeling of kind of a loneliness that you want, because it's beautiful to be there on your own, and you feel that you can just feel the presence of all these older folk or generations gone past. And it's amazing to have that space in your mind, because we're so unused to that now. We're so bombarded with instant visuals on our phones and in the world and in towns and cities and architecture, and everything is very instant. But to have moments on places like this, Mousa at the Nessaburgie, these places that are now derelict, it gives you a chance to really, really, really think and become a little bit more inside yourself. I think you kind of feel a bit cleansed after that. It's a really amazing experience. And then, it doesn't have to be for long. It's just really fine to kind of check in with your heartbeat, and these places allow you to do that, I think, like no other. Have you been here before?
I have been here, a few times. I was here a couple of years ago I was recording the Stormies.
Oh yeah.
And the wee fellows did not make a peep. They just chose to be silent.
You were there with tons of microphones and the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another funny story. Me and Maurice Henderson once came here to record the Silkies on the other side.
Yeah.
And we had this idea, and Maurice had all his recording equipment and microphones and all sorts of stuff. And we had the fiddles, and we had this idea that we'd play the fiddles for the Silkies and see how we got on, and we'd record it.
It's very sweet.
And it would be a great thing, and we'd maybe have it on one of the Fiddler's Bids albums, and we were really excited. So we came over here with the fiddles, and we set the microphone on the edge of the beach. We laid the cables and all that, and ran up the hill and pressed record, and we waited. And just when we saw the Silkies coming up, we just started to get our fiddles out, and all of a sudden about 100 yows just ran right across the microphone in perfect stereo from left to right. And It was really funny, and that was it. We both just rolled about laughing. The sulkies dived under, and that was the end of that. We get home. So that's 2 failed recording attempts from you and me on Mousa. Maybe we're destined never to get what we really need.
Maybe. We're just coming up to the broch.
It's some place. I love coming close in with a boat and just sitting. You know, you can get fairly close maybe, and just sitting and feeling the presence of the broch. It's such an incredible place. You sometimes have to pinch yourself that you can just sit and look at you on every day, you know. I mean, obviously I bide away now, but when I'm home, then it's just always there. And to have that thing that reminds you that there were people here 2,000 years ago is really levelling. I'm kind of intrigued to see what the acoustics are like in there.
Yeah, me too.
I took my fiddle. I don't know why me and Morris didn't do that all those years ago, actually. It seemed, I think we were so hell-bent on recording sulkies that we forgot about the obvious one. Test out the acoustics of the broch. Anyway, we'll do it now. Now then, I'm going to try the acoustics in here and see what they sound like.
Alright.
Yeah. Yeah.
It smells like storm petrels, which is excellent.
Lovely. The lovely, familiar hum. And this really is, I've never played in here before, so. Sounds fine. To the audience.
What tune was that, Chris?
It's a tune I wrote called Mary and Ewan's Wedding Waltz.
Should we try and go up the walls?
Why not?
Yeah.
I'll put this away because I
Okay.
don't fancy just taking a fiddle
No.
out of its case, and I'll leave it down here.
I should have put my guitar away.
You should have done, man. My goodness.
Such pretty steps.
You alright?
Yeah.
My first.
Oh. One of the guys that I interviewed, I think he was Belgian, off one of the tall ships, and he said the thing about Lerwick was that a lot of the big ports they go to, the music is like DJs and stuff. But he said here it's all live, and a lot of it's traditional. And I think that was really, for them, that was a big deal, you know, just to
Yeah.
turn up at the pub and fucking be playing. And apparently their captain was dancing all night.
Yeah, for sure. I think when people come here, they're captivated by the local bands. It's amazing just how good the musicians are here, and to be able to entertain folk in that way with live music. It doesn't all have to be traditional, but it has a cultural reference, and everything has a sound to it and a kind of a energy to it that common thread. We all kind of know each other or know of each other, and whatever kind of music we play, then there's this sort of this cultural thread that runs through it, which is, I think, is quite unique and really, really, really special.
We had a Fiddler's Bid reunion, speaking of energy, because that was really something else, and it just transported me back to being Piri and seeing you guys when you were just like still kind of teenagers almost, playing in the Fairall Hall, and everything just bouncing up and down and jumping, and yeah, that kind of wild energy that you guys can conjure up, and did perfectly well the other day as well.
I think because we were so young and daft and naive and just up for fun when we started, I think that's never really stopped. In a way, when we meet up, we haven't really grown up, and I mean that in the best, and nor would I want to, because it's amazing to just capture that kind of childlike energy and enthusiasm and innocence for music. It's really funny because there can be any amount of things going on in your adult lives that, you know, take you away, but actually just standing on a stage playing these tunes that some of them we've been playing for 30 years, and playing them was great for us. But equally, just speaking to a few people after the concerts, coming up and just saying their favourite tune or what it meant to them, and they minded this tune in a certain time, and I think that's kind of really demonstrated, if I remove myself and all of us from Fiddler's Bid, I think that's what music means to people. We're lucky because we get to play it, but it's almost like we're kind of removed from it as well, because the music takes on a life of its own, and it takes on so much meaning to people that is more than we could ever imagine. So you become like a caretaker of something which means so much to everybody. And that's it's a privilege, but it's humbling as well, and you realise your own place in music is not about your own sense of ego. It's actually you're there to carry music and let people feel just what they want to feel, and that's amazing, because you then can do good. You can galvanise people through their emotions and shared feelings, and that's incredible. So we're in a very fortunate position, but also humbling and daunting at some point, sometimes, a position to do that with these tunes. So it's great.
I'm just thinking about Hamnataing when you're saying that, because it is such it's a very evocative tune in it, and I'm sure I wasn't alone, like being a bit sniffy watching you guys play that on stage the other night.
Well, yeah, well, you probably brought that up on purpose. I never even thought about that, actually, but Hamnataing's right over there. Penny's just dropped, I see. Right, okay. Yeah, well, sitting looking at Hamnataing just now, and I wrote that tune and we're sitting over in Sandwick there overlooking Hamnataing. It wasn't actually me that named it. I just had this tune, but I was looking here, and we had people along, and there's a great local brilliant character called Don Farker who fishes around here. Fished around here all his life. In fact, I think he might be off today. And I was pointing out the window and saying, "Look, this is the piano. Literally looks out the window and over here on Mousa, and we're right opposite Hamnataing." And it was Don that said, "Well, the kid is looking at Hamnataing." And I said, well, I think that sounds nice. That sounds nice." So it just was like that. So forevermore, that's that little spot. So great. I was 14 when we started, and then we got the chance to go to Lorient Festival when I was 17. The folk festival was our first kind of gig. That was when the drug got us, because we up until then we'd only really been playing in the music room at the Anderson High School, and we'd done a couple of gigs for the local Cats Protection League, and there was a China club, China club, that they wanted us to play. We played for them as well, and all these little things in Lerwick. And I'm laughing, but I shouldn't be, because they were so damned important for our development. But they're just funny pretty events that we did, and then we got asked to do the folk festival, and we played in Hamnataing Hall, and we were so young and naive that we just went for it. We didn't even think about it. We just had no concept of what we were doing. We just opened our cases and rough and ready, and just did what we did. And I know that we had the same energy on that first kind of big concert that we do now. It hasn't changed. I remember hearing the roar of the crowd back, and they must have been quite delighted to see these young boys just playing like out of their skins and
Devils.
Like devils, yeah, because I suppose it was safety in numbers as well, and you're all egging each other on. So you have 4 players, but the it's like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and you're just playing, and it's a huge big orchestral cacophony of sound, and what a boost, you know. And after that, just never really stopped after that, and you know, it took us all over the place, and we've been to America and Australia and Tasmania and, you know, all over Europe, and it's been great fun. Yeah, so the other night was a sort of a retrospect, which I have to confess I'm never really into. I'm not a retrospective person, but I have to say I didn't tell anybody. I know this is going to be on Radio Shetland, but I really enjoyed it. So,
I mean, you could tell. You weren't looking miserable.
I wasn't. No, absolutely not. I was usually the kind of the suspicious of retrospective behaviour, but it was absolutely fantastic. Now, what's you pointing at there?
Scooty Allen.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can see that. Good on you.
The one bit that's still going really good is my eyesight.
Eyesight, well, yeah, it's better.
But Mum
At
always
least one
said
of us.
No, Mum always told me at 35 it would go.
Really?
Yes, that was her prediction. So
right.
I've got a year.
You've got a year.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll be grand.
Yeah. Even like when you were 14 and starting Fiddler's Bed, you were playing classical music as well at that point, weren't you?
Yeah, well, so my consistent learning was always through the medium of classical music, right up until I did a degree in that. But the traditional music was so present all the time that it's almost like it was just, that's the combination that has shaped how I play and how I think about music. So I couldn't change it, or I wouldn't want to change it, because I'm the result of that upbringing, which was learning, I suppose, studying classical music and learning all how beautiful that music is, but then just having that strong sense of tradition running along at the core of things. And that's really how I will, you know, that's how I'll live and die in music, with that, with the belief in both. And rather than, you know, when you're younger, and even right through my studies and right through my 20s, and arguably until relatively recently, you're still trying to battle about which is which. And now, through writing music and writing music for various people, but also being able to share that with another person who's gone through the same path as me, and that's Catriona Mackay on the harp. So we've been able to kind of help each other through that dilemma. And in the end, there's no dilemma. You just play what you feel like playing, and nobody can say if it's right or wrong. There's no problem if they didn't lick it, but that's fine. I'm happy with that. But it's right for me, and that's how I play, and that's how I write. So, you know, it was a huge settling kind of time in my life when I realised that was my voice in music, and that's the way it goes. So
do you find it a kind of thing you were torn between, or a contrast, or? Yeah,
because inevitably you're most, first of all, when you're learning, most people are representing one or the other. When they're teaching you, they want you to learn either traditional or classical. So that's fine. There's, okay, get it. And then we're still now, then there's a marketplace, and actually most people choose what they want to hear. And it's usually slightly more in the centre of a style. So, you know, it is a longer process to convince people to believe in their music, in your music, because sometimes they can't place what it is. They're like, oh, it sounds kind of traditional, but some folks say to me, I don't really like traditional music, but I really like that. And I said, well, it is, for me, it's completely traditional music, but okay, I get it. So as many folk maybe are a bit, might not be happy because it's not traditional enough, then you also open a door for folk that might not be as into traditional music as that. They might have another taste or whatever. So in the end it kind of works out, but it's a process to get there.
Because when you play about the stuff enough and break things down enough, then the labels start to seem quite arbitrary and a pretty bit silly sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, nowadays we're kind of lucky because you can, you know, have there's pros and cons to the way we listen to music nowadays, but with streaming and these big streaming giants who I would say in the end I don't like, but at least it has broken down that need to say that you're absolutely traditional or doing this, that. Anybody can upload a song and they can, if the music's good and it can reach an audience, then it's there for people to listen to, you know. You don't need a record label anymore, and record labels were always super at the centre of a musical style, and hopefully that doesn't need to be. Maybe in hugely commercial operations it's still like that, but at least it allows a lot of musicians to have a voice in the world, and that's really, really positive.
Yeah.
How is it with writing? Do you find that there's still boxes and pigeonholes when you're in your line of work, or are you free? That's maybe a difficult question.
I think if I wrote fiction, which I'd done, then yeah, that would be more of a thing.
Yeah.
But
Ken
what to expect with. Yeah, but then, you know, there's straight reporting and there's sort of more flowery stuff that I do a bit more now. And
okay.
You know, there's very newspaper style stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's like things where I will describe things more, or heaven forfend, express my opinion.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. And these things are shifting, and the kind of established norms of them are definitely changing, I think. So, and mostly that's good as long as the standard doesn't go down, especially with journalism. But right, where do we go now?
Well, we're just going out to the east side of the island. There's a fine pretty bit here, pretty bay. A fine pretty bay. Well, this is where the Yowgate happened. Me and Morris's famous Yowgate.
Have you still got the recording?
Yeah, well, it actually ended up on an album. I think it ended up on a secret track. Yeah, it was a yow came to Wardor Yarman with just roaring and shouting and singing songs.
Well, as I said, I listened to that a lot when I was about 7, and so I just thought you guys were just the wildest boys that ever lived.
Oh yeah, that's back in those days. That's how wild it got.
Trying to think of a way to sum up all the things that you do, and it is impossible. So I could maybe ask, what genre have you not done?
Well, that's the thing. I was saying earlier, I don't really think in genres anymore. I just the way I play, it's just a style that is my own, but it can lean into another genre. I don't have to adapt it too much to play with a orchestra or a symphony orchestra or something if we're doing that kind of music, or if we're playing jazz or straight traditional music. You just adapt a little bit what you do, or not if that's what the music requires.
need of all, but dear, my dear, pioneer, but dear, my heart is aced, pity light, welcome placed.
So you've been in Glasgow for quite a long time now.
Yes, 30 years. I went and did 2 years at school in there to finish off my school years to get improve my classical lessons enough to get into music studies. Doing that, it was my teacher up here that suggested it, and that it was a massive move. In hindsight, it was a massive move, but it was probably big decision for my parents to make because I was only 15. And that's when I went away to Glasgow. But it was never, they made it easy. They made it as easy as it could be to integrate me in there and give me the confidence and encourage me, so that it was no big deal. We didn't dwell on. There was no tears. It was just like, let's just do this. And this will be great fun. And so I always had that feeling. And Glasgow has been really, really good. I've got so many friends there now, and it's still in Scotland, and I got the chance to go further away, and I suppose I could have done, but I think culturally, and knowing that I had something to kind of work on, which was what I was speaking about, that relationship between the kind of music that I was playing, I think it was important for me to stay in Scotland and do that, so that there was understanding in the community, the music community and the wider community, as to if I was getting something wrong or getting something right, then folk maybe had a reasonable understanding about what was going on. They might have given me a bigger length of string. Mm-hmm. And I think that was right, I think that maybe nowadays it's been done more now, and it's a different climate musically, and people can move away, more crossover and stuff. But at the time, it was difficult. So it was right, and it was obviously just a stone's throw for Shetland as well, just a flight away or a quick nip up to Aberdeen and nip on the boat. So it never felt, in terms of geography, very far away. I quite enjoyed at the time the novelty of being a young Shetlander, a gregarious young Shetland fiddle player in Glasgow, just hawking around and just having a carry on, and I don't know. It was, I think, charming for me and charming for them. So good fun. Had some great times, and I still live there now and really enjoy it.
It's a good music city. Yeah.
It's a great music city, but more than that, it's a great people city. And there's a honesty to Glasgow people like there is to Shetland people. There's people doing each other good, people helping each other out, doing each other favours, and that kind of just getting on with stuff, and is really part of old school Glasgow life. It's a very cosmopolitan city, and of course a lot of people don't live like that, but when you meet real Glasgow folk, there's a real honesty to them and a kind of a lovely rawness, which I find so important.
I'm thinking of the Lorison Bar or the Scotia or some of those pubs.
Yeah, well, that's
you can always get a good chat. And
you can get a good chat, and there's that's where you get stuff done. That's where, if you need something done, if these kind of places, you go and find your joiner or whatever, or your plumber. Everybody knows somebody. So I kind of, I've got so many friends in Glasgow that come from all walks of life, and for me, that makes life so rich, incredibly rich. And even in this, where I live in Partick in the West End of Glasgow, it has in a small place, it's got Falkland Islands, the Western Isles, the kind of a Gaelic part of it, but there's an affluent part, and then there's a raw part, and there's a working part, and all these people just kind of muddle together, it kind of harmoniously, and it's really, really good fun. I've kind of become to really, really enjoy the part of Glasgow I live in because of that, because it's not too much of one thing, it's a real people place, I love that. It's good fun, but you know, that's partly because it's kind of close to home as well, and I don't need to miss home, you know, because I'm lucky in my work that I can travel, and I can, within reason, I can decide my own destiny, you know, a little bit, and if I need to take time out, it's never more than a few months or something. I just say, right, okay, time to go and, you know, relax, you know. So I don't miss home because I don't need to miss home, and that's really cool. I'm very connected up here with brilliant musicians and brilliant people, and you know, so that's a fortunate position to be in. It might sound strange to some folk, but that's how I feel, and it's a huge thing to me.
No, I mean, I feel very at home in Edinburgh and in Glasgow for a bit, and obviously especially here, but I do feel kind of torn between them sometimes. I think a lot of folk do, but if you can find that equilibrium, that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a lot of kind of big orchestra stuff and done stuff in Singapore, and like, what's been a highlight if you think back, kind of the best thing you've done so far?
Well, that's difficult.
Yeah, I should have asked you this before.
Not really, because some of the biggest and best have also been the most stressful, because I've been pushing myself really, really hard to set out of my comfort zone and do something. So recently we played, Catriona and myself played with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, and I've played with I've been lucky enough to play solo with orchestras many times over the last 20 odd years, and that's brilliant. But this time was the first time that Catriona and I had composed all the music, and we'd orchestrated all the music, so everything for the whole orchestra, and then got up in front of a packed out concert hall and performed it. Now, it was madness to do that. I mean, nobody really does that, but I just was like, well, I just want the experience. I want to know that when I stand up and play that it's from my heart, and every part of it is. And that's just, I mean, you can crumble quite easily. It's quite daunting, but it's important. I'm not saying I would do it every day, but that was life-changing to go through that. But was it enjoyable at the time? I don't know.
A lot of the best things are.
It's enjoyable looking back on it, but it was incredibly stressful, but rewarding, because you know that, you know, it's just, it's rewarding for yourself because you've worked as hard as you possibly can over many, many, many months. And I think whatever you do in life, you know, when you've worked hard on something, you make a big step forward in your career personally. It doesn't matter what other people think, but you know you're making personal leaps and bounds, then it's like a personal best at the Olympics or something like that. And that's, you can see when athletes do that, they don't really care. It's for themselves, you know, and that's so important. So, yeah.
Well, nothing good comes easy, does it?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've always kind of thrived on, I think that's why I was saying earlier on about not being retrospective, because it feels easy. It feels too easy, and I'm a bit of a sucker for wanting to keep creating and keep inventing or keep progressing and all that, and I think it served me really, really, really well. But I think enough was enough on Wednesday night. The time had come for me to chill out on that one and just have a right good laugh with the boys and play the old tunes.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. I was laughing at this actually because it's not like it was introduced as this kind of like one night only Fiddler's bed. It was just like, oh yeah, it's Fiddler's bed. And we're like, oh yeah, the boys are here. Yeah.
I know, it's kind of blasé. A lot of folk turned up. Yeah, but you know.
Well, especially because it was a free concert and folk were kind of having a drink at the back and wandering in and out. It was very chilled. You know?
Yeah. It was perfect. It was perfect.
Whereas I know what you mean. If it had been this kind of very special event.
Oh, I know.
Bridge, you know, I feel you would have been cringing a bit.
Aye, sometimes you can put too much emphasis on something, and you just, you know, you can be inhibited by the apparent gravity of a situation, and actually in reality, it's, for us, often something can just be another concert, but you start to believe all the stuff, you know, you can't never believe your own hype or never believe anybody else's hype, because rarely does it inflate you. It usually just makes you feel a little bit daunted, you know, because everybody's going getting, you know, high as kites about it. Oh, and you're, oh, this is going to be amazing. And before you know it, you're, oh, do we have to do that? Whereas if you just walked in and played a concert, then you'd probably do it really, really well, and everybody would just be as happy, and it would be a lot easier. But yeah.
Walk on a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a really annoying question. What would you have done in life if you weren't a musician? What would you be doing now?
Well, the reality is I don't think I could, because for as long as I can remember, I've only ever been able to think about music, and it's the only thing that's ever made me feel truly happy. But I once had this idea that I would like to study marine biology when there was, the careers advisor and all that.
Yeah.
And they were saying, you'll never make it in music. No, you've got to have a backup plan. Funnily enough, my mum and dad never ever said that to me. They always just said, right, go boy, that's fine, just do it well and make a success of it, whatever you do. So that was it. And they nurtured that. But you got advised to have a backup plan. And I've always been, going back to the sea, And especially under the sea, when I learned to swim in Fair Island, Gunglesant there, it was always under the water. Much more fascinated by what was going under the water than what was above the water. So I think that's what I would have loved to have taken an interest in, but that's just pie in the sky, really.
That's funny, because at the same time I mind all the careers advisors saying, what do you want to do? And I had no idea. And so I would just say oceanographer.
Ah, right.
Partly because I wanted to, and partly it just sounded really cool.
Could you imagine we all ended up in the same boat? And not being a journalist and a musician.
Yeah, and be like, the things we could have done.
We'd possibly both been really bad at our jobs and unhappy.
Quite possibly.
But it's a nice thought. This is fine new.
I think it's when I learnt about the kind of a bit later on, and things I didn't appreciate about the sea around us and how rich it is, because it's so cold and dark and, you know, rich in nutrients, and the seabirds are so ridiculously, what's the word? There's just so many of them.
Yeah.
And that's been a kind of growing fascination in my life. That, I suppose when you're pity, then you just take it for granted. And also the kind of threat to them now makes you think about this a lot more.
It's staggering when you hear the statistics about how much less seabirds there are around Britain, never mind Shetland, but it's horrendous. It really beats home the idea that we need to think carefully about what we're all doing here. Slow down a pea bit, but who knows. I think my favourite memory was playing in Moscow with the Russian Philharmonic Orchestra, and I think, like you, I grew a deep love. We were in Russia 3 times. I think you were there more, but or had more of a time there. But as a race of people, I couldn't be more sad by what's happening now, because my experience of Russia was so good and so positive and so strong and fun, and we need we can go down that route or whatever, but Russia, what a pity it chose to go down that route, because just before that, a few years before then, we were all just having the best of times together, and I'm sad to think that when will I see my Russian friends again, I think some great musicians, world famous musicians that we played with, and I don't know what their careers are doing. I don't know if I'll see them again, and it's devastating. Yeah,
that's an interesting thing, actually, thinking about if you're travelling to all these places and maybe they're new to you, but you're always, the point is to play with people, and you must have such an instant connection that kind of transcends like language boundaries or cultural differences because of the music that you're playing.
Yeah, that quickly became my overwhelming sense of why I do music. What's the point of this playing? And it's to bring people together. Sometimes you can bring people together because they all know it's a similar style or something, but everybody here likes Shetland traditional music, for example, or everybody, but in the world not everybody understands what your sound is, and that's where I've been lucky enough to play in a style which slightly transcends that, and you focus more on people's emotions, deeper emotions, and just letting people feel in a more soft way. They don't have to understand the nuance of what your accent is, for example, in music, but they can tell what you're trying to say emotionally, and that could be very poignant, it could be sorrowful or happy, or something that just brings people together in a concert hall. And I think that I was never so aware of that was when I was playing to cultures that were seemingly far away from my own, like I've been in Mozambique or in Moscow or in Japan, and seeing that kind of familiar people, just their bodies relaxing because they understood what you were saying, telling them, even though we have no language in common and not really much knowledge of our sound. But if your music is, I've always tried to make my music open so that it's as much about the person listening to tell their own story while they're listening to my music as me just dictating my story to them. And so you feed an idea and you feed a sound world and you give a emotion, and then people can kind of write their own stories, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Very often it's not very dissimilar to the one you're telling, and that's even more special when they can just feel it, you know. And Mozambique, we're sitting on the edge of the water, the sea there in Maputo, and all these people, African people, coming up, and just like the emotion in their eyes. And I've just been playing all this stuff that we'd written, and all heavily influenced by this landscape and sea, and yet they were all identifying with it. And I was just like, it could make you greet.
Well,
because that's the power of humanity and coming together and all that, you know.
yeah, you get to see the best of folk, and maybe you could say that as a journalist you're often seeing the worst, and people always say that, but I think that's so. You see both, and some of the wonderful things that I've been around has been to do with music, and in some terrible circumstances, but people coming together to like sing or do music therapy with bairns in a hospital or something.
Yeah.
Like that's, and yeah, at the end of the day it is very, very much just about our common humanity, and yeah, like the thing that I'll show people when I'm somewhere new is a picture of Shetland or a picture of Fair Isle, and you know, show them on the map, and then maybe I'll play them something.
Yeah.
And it's that, and as you say, like folk get a lot of emotion in their eyes about that, because
exactly.
Yeah.
This is I tell a lot of folk. I've never really said it, you know, publicly, but I speak to a lot about privately about one of the most profound and insightful things that was ever said to me in my life was in Tokyo, in a bar in Tokyo, and I was out with one of the guys that worked for our agent out there. And he's just like me, he's like a kind of similar height, similar build, has the glasses, all that. And he's like my Japanese brother, Hajime, and he was looking after us. But me and him went out one night for some sushi and some beer. And we were sitting there, and there was this, we were chatting away, and there was this businessman, quite a portly fellow, Japanese businessman. He leaned in and he was intrigued because we were speaking in English, and he asked me where I was from. And I said, well, I'm from Scotland. I thought that would be the easiest in. He might know where Scotland was. And he says, Scotland. I says, yeah, but actually, I'm from the very, very far north of Scotland. There's islands, Shetland Islands, and it's in the north. And he looked at me, and he just said, right. I knew you were from the north. Because here in Japan, in the north, they also speak through the side of their mouth.
Wow.
And I thought that was hilarious. It's typical Japan. They're so they have this deep thought. I just thought, right, okay. So suddenly my world changed, because then I thought, never mind all these political boundaries, these countries. We're all connected by the lines of latitude, or maybe longitude, or so this idea that we're all on the same line might have a similar mouth shape or head shape or something, or just way of getting on. And that changed me forever, that.
Yeah.
Just this businessman in Tokyo. Nobody ever said something as insightful as that to me anywhere. Maybe my mum and dad, but then it was this guy in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Well, we're just coming back to the boat. We're walking from the east side of Mousa to the west side of Mousa. The boat's just coming in, and the weather has just got from bonny to really, really fine.
Yeah.
The wind is warm, what little of it is there, and the sun is shining.
It's been a very, very pleasant afternoon with you.
It's been good walking around Mousa, actually. It's been fine. I've not actually, there's some bits I hadn't actually sat and just stopped for a while, so it's really fine. Usually just come over, and if we're over here it's usually just at the Broch and maybe a quick tootle around, but we've walked around nearly the whole island, so that's been really fine. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for listening to this episode of Lie of the Land with Jen and Chris Stout. The music for this programme is The Quarff Lasses by Joyce Reid and The West Shores of Quarff by Jenna Reid, performed by Filska. Also in this programme you heard Lullaby de Mirkenin for Lise Sinclair's album Iver Entrancing Was, the words by Vagaland, Dealer in Hope by Chris Stout and Catriona Mackay, and Chris's tune Hamnataing. Good night.